This is the fourth attempt at filming the intro for this YouTube channel, so at this point we're just going to go with it. Howdy, welcome to the first video for the YouTube channel called Data Center Battlegrounds. My name is Nate. I'm a research fellow here in the DC area on the east coast of the US. If there's an international audience watching this, I research the environmental impacts of data centers and generative AI for work. And this YouTube channel is essentially going to be a deep dive into the news that I find interesting in different categories. So we could cover international, we could cover domestic, we could cover the economy, we could cover energy. It's really cool because on my Chrome tab that you'll see pretty soon, we will divide it by different categories. And so my intent with this YouTube channel is to inform and to educate. It's not to advocate for any like one, let's say, political side, like data centers are bad, data centers are good. That's not the intent of this YouTube channel. It's more to inform and educate about what data centers bring in terms of both advantages and like disadvantages. So that's the purpose of this YouTube channel. So I'm thinking in terms of a posting schedule cadence. Mondays we'll probably just go through the news. I think it's going to be like deep dive rapid fire just because like there's so much out there that I've found, and we could spend hours talking about the news, but the attention span of folks on YouTube is incredibly short. And this is just a YouTube channel for fun that we're just like starting out as like a project. And then I'm thinking Wednesdays and Fridays might be YouTube React videos. Like I find a ton of YouTube React videos that we could just like watch together. We can pause at certain points. I'll give you a couple fun facts because like I read a lot of reports, I see a lot of trends in the news, I read a lot of papers, and so this is a fun way to kind of almost do like commentary and React style videos. So if anyone watches this, why should you care? So data centers are like the hot button topic right now, in addition to generative AI. You'll see a lot of this being built, this type of infrastructure being built across the US, and we're talking like massive amounts of money from these big tech companies. We're talking, I was reading today actually, like a couple $1 trillion are forecasted to be like overall spending for data center infrastructure in the US alone by like 2032 or something. That's insane. Like trillions of dollars. We're for reference, we're $40 trillion in debt as of June 3rd, 2026. So go figure. And so why should you care? Well, data centers are being built in your backyard. A lot of companies claim to bring certain advantages and benefits to communities, environmental, economic, social. But as we can also clearly see, there are a lot of things that we have to work on. So, water consumption issues, energy bills going through the roof, inflation, take your pick. So the purpose of this YouTube channel, again, is to inform and educate. It's not to advocate for any one particular side. That's what you mean by like being an independent like YouTube aficionado, as they say. So I think that's good enough for like an intro. You know who I am, why this YouTube channel exists, and I really do hope that you get like value out of this. That's the entire intent. Final disclaimer, this is my first time ever doing YouTube. The editing is going to be like minimal to none. I'm going to stammer a lot because this is like being done on camera live. The articles that I read, the YouTube videos that I watch are intentionally done like almost like, for the first time. And so like my reactions are like, natural and genuine. I might interject, I might yap for 5 minutes straight. So this is like going to be low low effort for editing and for scripting and stuff like that. And I will try to keep a consistent posting schedule going because that's what YouTube likes and that's what the social media algo gods all want. So anyway, thanks for being here. I really do appreciate it, and I really do hope that you and I learn together about what data centers are bringing to the world and the challenges that we have to face. And as you can see, we've divided this into different categories. We have international, domestic, financial, tech explained, and energy. Because this is like the first YouTube video, we'll keep this like on the shorter end. If folks want me to cover more, then we could like do multiple articles per like category. But for now, we'll just like stick to one category for each article, pretty much. So Brussels to big tech on the international front, embrace sustainable AI or go away. So energy-hungry data centers must support the EU shift to carbon-free power. This is very interesting because the thing is that The U.S. like has the infrastructure, the talent, the funding clearly, and then also we lead the world in the number of data centers that are being built. And so this is very interesting to see from the Europe front, where the EU's energy chief is saying companies that want to build in Europe are only going to be doing so if they are committed to the bloc's energy, climate, and environmental goals. This means supporting renewable and nuclear power sources rather than on fossil fuels. So for those of you who don't know, what's going on right now with data centers is kind of bring your own power generation, so BYOG for short. And the thing is that natural gas power plants are being built en masse in order to meet short-term energy demands. And if we take Virginia, right, because I'm in DC, Virginia's right down the road, a lot of data centers that are being built out or have been built out have diesel generators as like a backup in case like there's a heat wave and like energy centers or data centers have to be disconnected from the grid. So this combination of natural gas and fossil fuels, right, like with diesel generators, is very interesting because we have a article also in Energy that'll talk about the AI boom means that the US is now investing more in fossil fuels, which is a clear departure from what the previous administration did. So if you want to build in Europe and you're a data center or AI provider, you can only do so if you focus on renewable energy sources and not fossil fuels. So pretty interesting. Okay, on the domestic front. So Philly cops admit that they're tracking First Amendment activity because of AI or critical of AI. So this is concerning because what we're seeing right now is you've probably seen it on all the graduation videos with like the ceremonies with like the speakers that are like saying like, oh, you should embrace the moonshot, you should embrace the AI revolution, and then they get booed. So take that counterculture phenomena and then magnify that like 100-fold, right? And so what we're seeing is that there was a Fast Company article last week that said that was an unreleased document in the federal government, but somehow they got like the leak. And what's happening is basically federal agencies are starting to track pretty closely if you're anti-data center or anti-AI. And this article says that they're taking it a step further by scraping social media in order to see like what is going on, and then they're classifying folks as domestic violent extremists, DVE, which is pretty interesting. So there was also a number of cases with city council members getting death threats because they're pro data center. I think there was like an Indiana council member like a couple months ago. I was reading he woke up to 13 bullet holes in his home overnight, and then a note taped on his front door saying no data centers. So this rise of this counterculture movement, like we talked about before with AI and data centers, combined that with potential of violence, and then you start having like law enforcement, federal agencies, state governments, take your pick, starting to track folks that are classified as domestic violent extremists. I mean, the thing is that like the from what I've seen, the majority of like protests, community protests that are against data centers are nonviolent. So people have a right to speak out against a data center being built in their backyard, AI models taking their job, whatever you want. But where that crosses the line is when you actually use violence to, get your message or point across. Like, you shouldn't be threatening your city council member with death threats. You know what I mean? Like, there's a fine line between this. But this is pretty concerning. I mean, is it a crime, or would you be classified as a domestic violent extremist if you posted on LinkedIn like, oh, data centers carry environmental and social costs? Am I a domestic violent extremist now? Or does that only apply if, let's say, like, I don't know, I'm at a data center protest and it gets like rowdy, things like that. So it's something to keep track of. But this is in Philadelphia, so go figure. Okay. On the financial side, America's data center buildout is falling way behind schedule. Google raised a whopping fresh $80 billion and has a strategy for getting around the biggest bottleneck. So this is interesting because community opposition in 2026 is at an all-time high when it comes to data centers. Data Center Watch, which is a boutique research consulting firm, published that at the end of 2025, $156 billion worth of data center projects were just outright halted just because of community opposition. So apparently, Google has an answer to this particular conundrum, as the build out suggests, or the beginnings of an answer. So the company has taken a novel approach to getting around some of the bottlenecks facing data centers. So we've talked about the massive amount of power. So this concept of bring your own generation with building natural gas. So, for example, Google was in the news recently about building like a massive natural gas power plant for one of their hyperscale data centers. I forget where. It was like in the news like a while ago. But this was pretty interesting. So they've also raised $10 billion, or no, they pointed to these on Monday in announcing an agreement for Berkshire Hathaway to purchase $10 billion in shares and then plans to sell another 70 billion by various means this year. This is insane because like if you kind of like look into the financials like way that we're financing the data center build out and AI model build out, it's literally like debt based financing. In some ways, it feels like a massive Ponzi scheme. Like you probably seen like the Bloomberg what do you call it, like picture or like figure that literally showed the circular based financing when it came to a lot of the different tech companies and what they're funding. It literally is like a massive like circle, which is like pretty interesting. Um, but a lot of data center companies will also like sign power purchase agreements. That is where they like buy, for example, like if like in Texas, for example, if like there's a massive solar field that's producing power, Google will sign an agreement to buy that power that is being produced in Texas and pretty much like have it shipped across the energy grid. So we were also talking about on-site gas generation. Having on-site power is a strategic advantage for tech companies. So it appears this article is just about bring your own power generation. But at the very end, they just signed an agreement with Voltus where they will reduce power consumption during times of peak demand and make use of home batteries and smart thermostats to manage that. Fun fact, NVIDIA just made an announcement, I think 2 weeks ago, where they will start to partner with a startup out of Europe to build data centers, apparently like in your home, which is like pretty interesting. So it just goes to figure. I don't know. We'll see where all of this goes. But this article is probably just about bring your own power generation. But again, $80 billion for like almost like a funding round for Google. That feels kind of low considering they're like a big tech company, but that's still a massive amount of money. Okay, moving on to Tech Explained. So, water consumption is one of the foremost issues that I've seen in the environmental arena when it comes to data centers. There's a lot of different facts and figures that you'll see in the news and on scientific papers and research reports about like how much water does a data center consume? How do you track that? And so Google apparently has published water standards facing mounting scrutiny over data center water consumption. This is pretty interesting. So they released a framework calling for, better transparency, better practices, returning more water to local watersheds than its data centers consumed by 2030, avoiding water-intensive cooling in more water-stressed regions, helping to fund water infrastructure upgrades, pursuing alternatives such as reclaimed wastewater, and then disclosing water use annually. Yeah, so I think like the big takeaway from this is that none of these commitments are new on their own. So I think one thing that people forget, even though data centers are being built, it appears in more arid environments like deserts, like go figure. You know what I mean? Like data centers have been making like you have to realize that these are very complicated pieces of like equipment slash machinery. You have some of the best engineers in the world working on different environmental like verticals, like the water consumption problem. How do you reduce water, right? Why do data centers use water? Well, it's an effective method of getting rid of the waste heat that's generated in the data center because it consumes a ton of power. And so I get it. It's like if you have a hyperscale data center in your backyard, it consumes, let's say, potable blue water, drinking water to cool the data center, and that has a direct impact on the community, you're going to get a negative reaction. But I think also at the same time, to give the data center industry some credit, they have made some strides in the water consumption department with, for example, using closed loop water systems that instead of guzzling billions of gallons like a day. Instead, it's more of an upfront cost of like a couple 100 million gallons instead of billion. It's still a lot of water. Don't get me wrong. My point with this is that this is a nuanced issue that definitely requires more transparency. We need more information on how much water that these facility levels use instead of aggregated totals. So facility level information instead of aggregated totals in a region. Moving on to like, do you have to build here in the first place? And then also pursuing alternatives like reclaimed wastewater. I saw in another interesting case study that a lot of initiatives are being spun up around this idea of using wastewater instead of like potable drinking water, which is like pretty interesting. And then there is this like contradiction when we build out a data center. I think we have to ask this bigger question like, why are we building data centers in extremely hot environments when they could be built somewhere else? That is a complicated question that we cannot answer in like a 10-minute YouTube video. But this is pretty interesting. I mean, they're publishing more standards. I hope that we can work on this data center water consumption problem because I think water consumption is the first main issue in the hierarchy of environmental issues. You have water consumption for number one, energy is number two, and then number three is probably like what? Land, noise, or air pollution for public health impacts. And then finally, on the energy front, the AI boom means that the US is now investing more in fossil fuel power than China. So the only thing that I want you to take away from this article is that just look at this. So AI boom means the US is investing more in fossil fuel power than China. So for a while, we were below, in terms of investment, I think like in fossil fuel power. China was up ahead because they were catching up after the revolution like many decades ago. And then what happened very, very recently was that in the span of like, let's say the past maybe 5 to 10 years, China like they literally 10x like there's arbitrary number, not actual, but for metaphors, they 10x their solar investment, which was insane, and they kept it up. That is the amazing part with China is that they have kept up their solar investment while the US like was lagging behind, and now we've just almost not stopped, but we don't have the same level of interest in that with this current administration with climate and anything environment. So this is a very interesting chart because look, the US is now slipping back into fossil fuel investment, which makes sense because this administration is all about drill baby drill. The Iran conflict is also putting a ton of pressure on the markets right now. Everyone's speaking out because like we don't have any more oil apparently in our reserves, and natural gas is the, let's say, insurance for the short-term energy demand spike that we're all seeing with data centers. So fossil fuel power investments, ironically, are going through the roof. Natural gas, oil. I'm even really reading some stuff about coal, which was like supposed to be phased out, such a long time ago. And then China is in fact like diversifying their energy portfolio, and they've done amazing on the solar front. I mean, the time it takes to build out like a solar field in China compared to the US, I mean, this is part of the conversation also around permitting, around nuclear power. What do we do with the National Environmental Policy Act? All this different type of stuff. Yeah, the US, the Trump administration policies have phased out tax credits for renewables, which means that the International Energy Agency is revising its forecast for new wind and solar powers. Let's see. U.S. data centers are the biggest source of demand globally for new gas power plants, apart from the U.S. as a whole. So we're in a class all on our own, just because like we have so much natural gas in the U.S. My God, that's insane. So anyway, that is the news in a nutshell. We have energy, tech explained, financial, domestic, and international. This was a fun little breakdown of the news. So a couple of things before we just end. So really quickly, we have a newsletter called The Climate Code. It is a summary of the latest additions to the AI and Environment Resource Hub, an open access database cataloging a bunch of resources at the intersection of AI, data centers, and the environment. So give that a check if you want. subscribe to the newsletter. I'll update like the YouTube information with all of that. And I hope you enjoyed this. This was fun. I love kind of going into the news, yapping, giving my take on like different things. I'm keeping it deliberately short just because, again, this is my first time doing this, and we'll see where this goes. So I think this will get published like maybe Thursday or Friday. Again, news on Mondays. Wednesday and Friday will be YouTube React videos. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you for tuning in. Hopefully, this is the start of a long journey on the channel for Data Center Battlegrounds. See you around.